know the sports guys, they are all in the crowd. But,
Yeah, I mean,
it is a herd mentality for sure.
there's so many.
Good afternoon, guys.
Good.
Good.
Jeff, just take us through your thought process, what went into the decision to acquire Desmond Bane?
Well, that's a pretty easy decision for us, honestly. We've valued him very highly for a while, and there are a few guys in the league that you kind of agree with our little crew that if they become available, you're going to be aggressive. And when I stood here in front of you guys after the season, I honestly didn't expect him to be, available in these conversations. But when we learned about that, as we kind of did our laps around the league, we shifted gears and, made it a priority for us.
How quickly did this come together? When did you learn that he was potentially available, and how long did this take?
Well, I don't want to get too deep into conversations that I feel are best kept private, but it took a little time. It wasn't a quick hitter.
When you look at what Desmond can bring to this team, how many of those kind of boxes? You mentioned he's a player that you guys kind of universally agreed was the guy that you should chase if he became available. But how many of those boxes does he check?
I mean, the guy is almost the player you would design if you could start from scratch. Because obviously we've spoken a lot about our need for shooting, but we've also talked about playmaking, and I've talked about adding skill. And Desmond is such a unique player because he's one of the best shooters in the NBA, but he's also a gifted playmaker, and he generates shot creation for himself and for others. He creates advantages with and without the ball. High IQ player. So he's a very unique player. He kind of is one of the 90th plus percentile wings for putting him into guard actions. And he operates those actions at high frequency and high efficiency. So he checks every box. And then you want to talk about the other end of the floor. The guy's tough, he's physical, he's locked in every night. He's kind of, one of those guys I feel that coaches know exactly what they're going to get from every night. And just monster competitor at the highest level. I kind of think of him as like just an old school tough guy,
Do you have any sort of previous relationship with him at some point?
No, I don't. But I can tell you that part of what we all do in this league is we compile data. We make it our business. Every team does, to gather as much intel on every player. Especially if staffs change over or players switch teams, and I can just tell you that there aren't too many people that I think the league regards as highly in their locker room, in their organization, in practice, as Desmond Bane. He's by all accounts just one of those rare guys that is going to, I believe, impact our team in every possible way.
Jeff, you see 4 first-round picks. I think there's some sticker shock with that. How do you assess, or how do you assign value to those picks when you're doing a deal like this?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, because I think that obviously we don't know what the value of those picks are, right? They're future picks, and that's up to us to determine what the value of those picks are. So obviously the one that we do know is this year, 16, and clearly part of us taking the temperature of this trade was our feelings about 16, so we have to bake that into how we look at the overall package. And then going forward, 3 of the remaining picks are under our control. So, we feel that we're betting on ourselves. We feel like we're going to be a good team. We feel that, the other unique thing about a guy like Des being available to obtain in a trade is the fact that he's just about to turn 27. And so if we are a good team, then we hope to be a good team for a while, because, our age profile is that our, most highly paid, kind of core 4 players are ages 23 to 27. So, hopefully we can come to an agreement with Paolo this summer. We'll be having those conversations shortly, and have this group together for a long time wearing Magic uniforms. So that obviously will determine what the value of those picks are. And some of this is this is what the NBA is about, right? It's betting on yourself. It's putting pressure on yourself. It's elevating your standard. I will say that one of the unique things about this trade, when you think about the caliber of a player that Desmond Bane is at the age that he's at, and with the contract control that you have, is that we gave up none of our own core pieces. So this was by definition going to be, a draft capital trade.
When you look at the puzzle, how many of the pieces do you feel like you have? Are you set? You're complete, or are there still some moves coming?
Well, the other part of the math for the draft outlook was we still have 25, so we're still in this draft, and obviously we need to round out our roster. So we have work to do for the next week and a half. We need to plan our free agency. We need to go through the draft process and augment the roster where we can. We still think there are places where we hope to get better, but I think this is a huge impact to our team.
You mentioned the kind of salary cap realities come for everyone.
Yeah.
And doing this, you definitely invited in a little bit.
Yeah.
What considerations were that kind of in, and what was the conversation with the DeVos family about making this move and potentially dipping more than just a toe into those waters? Yeah,
no, you're right. We put our foot on the gas here. So as I've always said, like that train is coming for everybody, and we probably skipped a station here. I hope that our team is good enough to merit where the finances will take us, but I've told you guys that the DeVosses are committed to this team, and man, you talk about like showing that. The DeVos family wants to give the city a winner so badly, and this trade is proof of that.
Jeff, we were here about a year ago when you signed Contavious Caldwell-Pope.
Yep.
Obviously, you have to give something to get something, but what do you think changed with his role description for this team in the future?
Well, I'm sorry, I'm not following. Were you with KCP?
When you signed him a year ago,
yeah.
I think you viewed him as a piece of the short-term future. It was a 3-year deal, and now he's not on the Magic.
Yeah.
So what, in that lens, what changed for his role, I guess?
I think Kenny's game is dependent upon others offensively. He's not a guy that creates his own shot. That's not who he is. And so I think like the injuries to Franz and Paolo and Jalen are 3 shot creators. Really upended our whole offense, and that's why I've always said it's not just Kenny. Our whole team struggled to shoot. We did not get the same quality of shots that we had gotten the year before. And so, obviously, look, none of this matters if your team isn't healthy. None of it. So, if we had health last year, I think Kenny would have been the guy he's been for his whole career. Kenny's a hell of a player. And I think adding a guy like Dez will give us like an elite level shooter, but also a guy that's a playmaker, a guy that has behind Ja Morant ran more pick and rolls for anybody on the Grizzlies. And so to have that guy that'd be able to put pressure off the dribble, another guy, and hopefully Jalen additionally, we get excited about that.
You touched on it a little bit, but how much does your draft philosophy change now that you just have the 25 and then the second round as well?
I don't know if it changes. I think we have to go through the process. Obviously our roster's changed, so maybe from that perspective we may have to recalibrate the needs and how we want to fill up the positional needs that we have. But I don't think our draft philosophy changes. 25 is obviously a later first round pick, but I think we were looking at some interesting guys that we're starting to get our arms around a little bit, and we're excited about that pick.
I know he'll be available tomorrow, but can you share anything from what Desmond has said about joining this franchise? All
I can tell you is, Coach and I FaceTime with him yesterday, and he's really excited to be here. He was actually on vacation in Florida, so he sees the fit. He's excited to, I think, take us to another level. I think he sees how that could happen, and I think that he's heard about the sort of organization and the sort of locker room that we have, and I think it's going to be an amazing fit, and I feel he does as well, so we can't wait to get him in.
He's obviously a competent guy anyway, but to see what was traded for him, do you think that's going to put maybe an added chip on his shoulder, even bring him to another level? See, wow, look what this team traded for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly we showed how much we value him, so I guess in that respect, but I don't think this is a guy that needs motivation. This is one of those, elite level mental performers, and he's physical, he's tough, he brings it every night, he's never not completely locked in, but at the same time, he's a very low mistake player, very intelligent player. So he's going to give us a ruggedness and a physicality and a maturity, even though he's just about to turn 27, that I think will really impact our team.
Obviously, you're acquiring a player in Desmond Bane, and that kind of operates independently, but how much does maybe the temperature around the league and kind of how trades are done to kind of elevate these teams, and even maybe how open it feels the East might be next year with Boston dealing with injuries and Milwaukee dealing with injuries? How much does it feel like that door is open and this was the time to come through?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it seems to be a hot topic right now. I can tell you that we'd have made this trade at any point. Our goal isn't to win the East, it's to win the championship. And the first step to doing that is we've got to move our team forward and get ourselves into that conversation. And we're hopeful that this trade will do that. Does that mean it's going to happen immediately? We have to see. We have to let these guys get together. And the beauty of this trade is they're all at the age profile and contract profile. We'll be able to keep them together for a while. So I don't look at it as like we're chasing the East or, hey, Boston has injuries or anything like that. I look at it as we're a factor now. I think we're a real factor. And when I first was in front of you guys, when we kind of plotted out this rebuild, it seems like it was longer, but it's been about 3.5 years. And I think the stated goal was to build a sustainable winner, right? And so, look, we're hopeful that this is a winning team and that we can keep winning for a while because these guys are young. So I think there's actually not only the hope that we can sustain it, but when you think about what Franz, what Paolo, what Jalen, what Anthony Black and Tristan and all of our young guys, Goga, and all of our young guys, what they're going to look like, Jet, what they're going to look like in 3 or 4 years, I mean, it's kind of exciting to think about that because they should get better every year, including our main 2 guys.
With your picks where they are, so late in the first round, it's like, what is the philosophy when it comes to the draft?
I think the philosophy is to add the best player, and we spend a lot of time on the person. I think that character matters in this league, and consistency and fight and togetherness and understanding how you slot into a greater good, and we spend a lot of time on that, and obviously we'll pay a lot of attention to skill sets and how they can augment the team. But right now, if you look at our team, it's not going to be easy to get a guy on the floor, a rookie on the floor, and that was part of our math when we looked at even 16 this year. So I don't think our philosophy changes greatly.
We always kind of ask this just generally when we do this press conference every year. But what's the feeling on this draft class, especially where you guys are sitting? I know you won't get into any specific players, but what's the general feeling?
It's a good draft, Philip. I don't know what to say. I think drafts always surprise us 5 years out. I think there are going to be some players that teams miss on, and I think that obviously you draw a line under 1, you draw a line under 2, and then it's really wide open. It's really wide open after that. And I think you start to see a little bit of a jockeying around 8 or 9. I think there's forming a somewhat of a line in the sand around that portion of the draft, and then it just completely expands. So that's how it seems to be shaping up.
How important is the skills of Bane of shooting for 3 for this team?
I'm sorry.
How important is Bane's skill shooting for 3 for this team?
It's extremely important. We have not been that good at it, so we got to get better. And adding, Des, he's an elite level shooter, and his shot profile is so versatile. He can get his own shot. He can shoot off the dribble. He's an elite catch and shoot guy. But more importantly, he can play off that. If he's going to get a closeout, he can make plays off the dribble, get by guys, set up the next guy. He creates advantages. Even when he doesn't have the ball, he knows how to move without the ball. So the gravity, the way that defenders just have to stick to him over screens, off the ball, is going to, we believe, will have a big impact on everyone else's game too.
One of the reasons you brought Kenny in, you said was
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Do your colleagues around the league look at a trade like this and be like, wow, Jeff's ready to deal, maybe we can make another trade here? Is there more of a fallout after a big trade like this?
Honestly, I think what happens probably is maybe the opposite effect, where they see like, oh wow, they gave up a lot of assets. They kind of, compressed themselves further financially, so they're probably not going to be able to do as much as they could have, a few days ago. And it's actually a very important question, because part of what we need to do now is we need to lap the league and understand like where we fit into teams' plans, because our teams changed so dramatically in the last couple of days.
Personality-wise, what do you look for in a player? You said character matters earlier. I'm just curious.
I mean, competitiveness, toughness, intelligence, team orientation, consistency, being a giver, an energy giver, just what you would look for in any walk of life. Basketball is no different. Being a professional athlete is as hard a job as you can imagine. The pressures that come with that, and being able to navigate that, being able to be in a locker room where you need to coalesce with your team in order to achieve a common goal, but you also have your own careers to think about. It's an incredible thing that these guys do, and it requires great character.
And Dev checks that box?
Dez is, as I alluded to earlier, I think, by all that we are able to acquire, and all that the league, I think that holds these guys up, is at the top of the ladder with those guys. Like, he's one of those guys. He's what you guys know. I don't use the word culture, but like, he's one of the guys that, as we were doing our laps and we do our intel, that he's a culture driver. He's one of those guys that tag keeps getting applied to him. And I feel like we have a room full of Dezes. I feel like this is what our team is about. It's what we've tried to build here, and I think he's just going to be a great fit.
One of the reasons you brought KCP in, or you said Kenny won a championship. He's got that experience. He's got that cachet. How do you replace that in the locker room moving forward?
Well, look, yeah, 100%. And I also think that we've made the playoffs the last 2 years now. These guys are getting their own experience. They're learning what it is to win in the playoffs. They're learning what it means to, show up in the postseason and the length of the season. The next step is to get to another round and learn how long this thing is and how hard it is to close out a series. And Dez comes in, as I said, with that age profile. Dez has deep playoff experience, but he's also got that age profile where he'll be, learning with these guys and going through it. And we look at our team internally and just feel that there's so much growth baked into this thing. And, they'll bring it out of each other. I think that's part of like the character, portion too, is they'll challenge one another. They'll get on one another if they're not holding up their link of the chain. So, it's a great question, but I think that we need to start winning now, and hopefully this gets us to another level.
Obviously, health is kind of the big thing hanging over
Yeah.
the team. I know guys are kind of scattered to the wind in the off season, but where's an update on where Jalen and Mo are at as they continue their recovery from surgery?
They're scattered to the wind. They're doing great. I mean, our performance guys are in touch with them all the time, and as a matter of fact, they're in touch with the people they're working with. But they're progressing, right on time, and they're both doing really well. You guys know what kind of relentless workers they are, and the energy they're going to bring to it. You can imagine. So they're doing great, and I think they're tracking well.
Everyone good? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.